Why did the room go quiet the moment she walked in? And why did every man at the table pretend she wasn't there? It was a question she had learned to stop asking, though somewhere deep inside, it still stung the way an old bruise does when pressed. Master Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma stood in the doorway of the Fort Irwin Mess Hall, dust from the Mojave Desert still clinging to her boots, her shoulders, even her eyelashes. The desert coated everything eventually, but it never dulled those eyes storm-sea blue and locked in a perpetual, unreadable calm. She moved through the room as if she wasn't walking among men who doubted her, but through ghosts that had already been left behind. No one knew her, not really. They saw a Navy uniform in an Army desert. They saw someone small, quiet, easy to disregard. They didn't see the scar at her jawline, half hidden by the collar of her shirt. They didn't see the years behind it. They didn't see the weight she carried so silently. It felt like a second spine made of secrets. Only she knew what she had survived to stand here. She carried her tray to a corner table, choosing the seat with her back against the wall, a habit too ingrained to question. She ate methodically without hurry. She listened to the air, the false bravado, the jokes lacquered over insecurity, the endless noise of people who believed life still owed them victories. She didn't judge them. She simply understood them better than they understood themselves. But then the quiet shifted. Four soldiers, young, loud, freshly minted with confidence, had noticed her. Their glances had begun earlier in the day, small and dismissive at first, then turning into whispers that trailed her like desert wind. "Boat girl. Wrong uniform. What's she doing here?" Probably some admin clerk. She had heard every word. But hearing never meant reacting. She finished her meal and rose, carrying her tray toward the return line, only to find her path blocked. The four of them had moved with a practiced, territorial swagger, positioning themselves into a loose semicircle around her. Roared Diaz Chin Ali. One with a jaw like a bulldog, one with a smirk too big for his rank, one built like a wall, one still more boy than man. Roar stepped forward, height and bulk weaponized. "Master Chief," he said, his tone dripping with the kind of politeness used only when someone wanted to insult you slower. "You sure you're in the right place? I mean, you Navy, right? See, that way." Diaz laughed, a quick, sharp bark of delight at someone else's discomfort. Anna's expression stayed still, perfectly still. "Excuse me, Sergeant," she answered softly. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was the calm of someone who had faced storms far more real than four restless soldiers hungry for a target. Roar stepped closer. "You're on our turf, Chief, Ranger country. We run a certain standard here. Don't know if you've heard of it." She didn't blink. And maybe that's why frustration flared in his eyes. There is nothing more infuriating to a man trying to intimidate a stranger than a stranger who doesn't change her breath. He leaned in, invading her space. "You don't move until I say." He never finished. There was no warning, no drawn-back punch, no dramatic flourish. Her body simply shifted, a subtle transfer of weight that could have easily been mistaken for breathing. Then the world snapped. Diaz went down first, his knee collapsing under a precise palm strike that landed with a sickening pop. Before his scream even formed, her elbow drove backward into Roar's diaphragm, stealing his air and folding him like a collapsing tent. Chen moved, but his stance was already compromised. She hooked his ankle in a clean sweep and gravity did the rest. He crashed to the floor, helpless. Ali stumbled back, untouched but frozen in stunned terror. 20 seconds, that's all it took. 3 men down, one immobilized in fear, and Anna Sharma standing in the center of them, barely winded, barely changed. She didn't gloat, she didn't curse. She simply stepped past them, returned her tray, and walked out of the mess hall. Behind her, the silence felt heavier than the storm clouds that sometimes cracked over the Mojave sky. She didn't look back, but she felt the shift, the invisible snap where ridicule turned into fear, and fear turned into something they didn't yet have a word for. The next morning, the tone of the base had changed. She was summoned to Colonel Madsen's office, a man carved not just from regulation, but from the belief that the world only made sense when everyone stayed inside their assigned box. He held her file as one might hold an item that had arrived by mistake. "Your record's thin," he said, flipping through the redacted pages. "What I can read doesn't impress me. What I can't read concerns me." She simply held his gaze. "You are here," he continued, "as an advisor, not a leader, not an operator. You will carry a radio and a rifle. You will not engage unless instructed. You will follow Sergeant Rohr's orders. You will stay out of his way. Understood?" She nodded once. "Perfectly, Colonel." Her voice had no edge, which somehow irritated him more than if she'd argued. He dismissed her with a wave. When she reached the motor pool, the Rangers were already prepping their gear. Their expressions were tight, stiff, a painful blend of bruised pride and unspoken confusion. Rohr didn't hide his resentment. "You stay at the back," he said firmly. "You speak when spoken to, you don't advise, you don't suggest. You're just a witness, Chief, nothing more." She acknowledged him with a simple nod. No challenge, no threat. But it wasn't submission. It was patience, a deeper kind, quiet and steady as an untouched ocean floor. As they loaded into the Humvee, Rohr pointed her to the worst seat, the rear-facing one, usually meant for gear or prisoners. "Your spot," he said, smug. She sat without a word. If anyone had noticed carefully, they would have seen it then. The way she strapped in cleanly, the way she arranged her gear with measured efficiency, the way she exhaled once, slowly, as if preparing for a familiar kind of loneliness. The engine roared. The Humvee surged into the desert, leaving the base behind. In the dusty mirror, the men saw a Navy Master Chief, quiet, contained, easy to underestimate. But the desert would show them the truth soon enough. In ways none of them were ready for. In ways none of them would forget. And in ways that would make every man on that mission question not just her, but himself. Because there was something she hadn't told them. Not yet. Not until the desert forced her hand. Why did the wind suddenly taste like metal, and why was she the only one who felt it? The desert had its own language, subtle and ancient, spoken in shifts of air and whispers of dust. Most soldiers never learned it. Some died because of that. But Anna Sharma heard it now before the others, long before the sky revealed its anger. They were deep in the exercise zone, the cauldron, a stretch of scorched wilderness that twisted teams into knots and stripped pride down to bare nerves. Rohr led the formation with the stiff confidence of a man following doctrine to the letter. His compass was always out. His maps were always open. His pace was always too aggressive, as if distance alone could prove something. Anna walked 30 meters behind the squad, the assigned ghost role, a shadow, an outsider, an extra body the team didn't want. They barely spoke to her. They didn't need to. Silence had always been her native tongue. For the first 24 hours, the desert was simply relentless, hot enough to burn thought itself. It drained them of water, then of humor, then of patience. Sweat dried before it could fall. The ground shimmered like a fever dream. Chen stumbled more than once. Diaz cursed under his breath. Even Rohr's swagger began to thin at the edges. But Anna, she moved with the kind of calm that made noise seem unnecessary. She never rushed, never dragged. Her steps were measured, almost meditative. She read the land the way others read expressions. She stayed quiet because quiet was safer, because quiet kept her mind where it needed to be, because quiet kept the memories from speaking too loudly. But that metallic taste in the air, it pulled her back. She paused, scanning the sky. A bruised dark smear bloomed at the horizon, so faint that a less experienced operator would have missed it entirely. She didn't. "Sergeant," she called, her voice steady. Roar didn't slow, didn't even look back. "What now?" "A storm's coming." Dia snorted. "Really? What's next? You gonna read the tea leaves in the sand?" She didn't respond. She simply kept watching the horizon. Roar checked his wrist weather monitor, tapping it twice. "Forecast says clear." "That isn't a forecast," she said softly. "That's a warning." He rolled his eyes. "We push on. Checkpoint Delta before nightfall. Keep moving." The squad followed him. But she remained still for a long moment, feeling the wind shift, the way it dragged across her skin, the way it dropped temperature in sudden trembling dips. Then she moved too, unwilling to be separated, but increasingly certain they were walking toward disaster. The desert did not wait long to prove her right. The sky, once a flawless blue dome, began to dim rapidly, as though someone was lowering a massive curtain across it. The wind picked up sharply. The light turned ochre. Dust thickened in the air. The horizon vanished behind a roiling wall of sand. Only Anna recognized the shape of it. A haboob. Not a sandstorm, a monster. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, with urgency. "Sergeant," she called again, louder now. "We need cover, we have minutes." Roar stopped only to glare at her. "We're not changing course based on a gut feeling." "It's not a feeling." Her voice was still calm, but her eyes sharpened like flint. "It's physics." Diaz turned, mockingly shielding his eyes to stare at the horizon. "Looks like dust. We've seen dust." "You've never seen that," she said. But they ignored her. Pride is a loud companion. It drowns warnings, muffles reason, turns leaders blind. The wind hit them like a slap. Then another. The storm exploded over the horizon, a towering brown wall swallowing sunlight, swallowing distance, swallowing everything. Visibility collapsed to less than 10 feet. The desert shrieked, dust stabbed at exposed skin, sand filled mouths, eyes, ears, lungs. Roar shouted, "Form a perimeter, get low." Training kicked in, but training was useless now. Their formation fell apart immediately. The wind scattered them like paper scraps. Chen's radio crackled with static, then died altogether. Ali tripped and nearly vanished into the swirl. Diaz struggled just to stay upright. Panic seeped into every movement. Except hers. Anna dropped low, making her body small, aerodynamic against the wind's fury. She crawled toward the nearest voice, O'Malley's, yelling in pain. The storm tossed him like a rag doll. His ankle twisted violently when he fell. Panic burned in his eyes. "Private," she said, reaching him, "keep your breathing shallow. You inhale too deep, the sand will cut your throat." He could barely hear her. She looped a rope around his torso and clipped the other end to her belt. Then she went back out. One by one, she found them, Diaz first, then Chen, then Roar. She didn't shout. Sound didn't travel. She moved by feel, by instinct, by reading the shape of the storm the way a diver senses currents in the dark. She clipped each man to the rope, connecting them all into a human chain. She pressed her mouth close to Roar's ear. "There's a rock shelf northwest, a shelter, move now." He stared at her with stunned disbelief. "How the hell would you know that?" "I don't have time to explain." She led the crawl, dragging 4 grown men behind her. Muscles strained. Knees tore against jagged stone. The storm roared with the voice of a god trying to bury them alive. But she kept crawling. She didn't navigate by sight. Sight was useless. She navigated by memory, by terrain cues she had registered almost unconsciously hours earlier, by the ground slope beneath her palm, by the faint shift in wind direction as the rock formation disrupted airflow. She had done this before. In worse places. With worse odds. The wind howled, then suddenly softened just slightly. They had reached it. A shallow rock overhang, barely big enough for 5 bodies. But it was shelter, a pocket of stillness in a world trying to erase them. They collapsed inside. breathing hurt, their faces were raw, their eyes burned. O'Malley's ankle swelled grotesquely. Roar sat against the stone, chest heaving, eyes wide with humiliation and something deeper, something like dawning truth. He had lost control, completely. She had saved them, completely. Outside, the storm raged on, a living creature beating its fists against the rock. Inside, Anna moved with quiet, terrifying efficiency. She inspected O'Malley's ankle, her fingertips precise, gentle, clinical. "Fractured fibula," she said in a voice that didn't shake. She splinted it using a SAM splint and tape, then handed him painkillers. Next, she assessed their water supply, damaged, leaking, insufficient. Roar swore, "We're screwed." She didn't waste breath arguing. She unpacked her poncho, spread it, anchored the edges with stones, then placed a chemical heating pad beneath one side. A makeshift condensation still. Water from thin air. Dia stared at it, stunned. "Where'd you learn that?" "Same place you learned to underestimate me," she said quietly. Her face was calm. Too calm. Almost haunting. Hours passed before the storm began to lose its fury. The temperature dropped sharply. Dust choked the air. They huddled together for warmth, 4 proud rangers and the silent master chief who'd kept them alive. It wasn't until they drifted into uneasy silence that Roar finally asked the question sticking in every mind. "How did you know where the shelter was? You couldn't even see." She kept cleaning sand out of her rifle. Her fingers didn't stop moving. "I saw the creosote bushes earlier," she said. "The ones with deeper color means they're feeding off a rock shelf beneath. Shelves almost always form an overhang on the leeward side." He stared at her, speechless. She finally looked at him, not with superiority, not with pride, but with a quiet, weighed-down honesty. "I told you this desert talks," she murmured. "You just weren't listening." And the truth in her voice, quiet, steady, patient, held more weight than the storm outside. More weight than any rank or title ever could. She had saved them. But she had also revealed something she had tried to keep buried. Something they weren't ready to understand. "Not yet. Rest," she said softly. "You'll need your strength." Because the storm wasn't the real danger. The real danger was still ahead of them. And she knew it. Because she had been here before in a different desert, a different hell, a different life. A life she never wanted to speak of. A life she hoped they would never force her to reveal. What if the storm hadn't come to kill them, but to expose the truth she tried so hard to hide? Dawn broke like a bruised whisper over the Mojave. The storm had moved on, leaving a devastated landscape behind, dunes reshaped, tracks erased, the world scrubbed clean as if the desert itself wanted to start over. But the storm hadn't erased everything. It hadn't erased the fear in their eyes when they looked at her. It hadn't erased the questions, they were too shaken to speak. And it hadn't erased the truth she carried in silence, heavier than any rucksack. The overhang provided the last pocket of warmth before the sun returned with its merciless heat. Roar was awake before the others, exhaustion still hanging off him like a second uniform. He sat with his elbows on his knees, staring down at the broken desert as if it had betrayed him. Or maybe as if he had betrayed himself. Anna stood a few feet away, already scanning the terrain with the quiet intensity of someone who'd slept in war zones far harsher than this. She had cleaned her rifle again. She had reorganized her pack again. She had rested, but she had not stopped. She never really stopped. "Sergeant," she said softly, "drink something before the sun rises." Roar accepted the canteen she offered. He hesitated before taking a sip, as if unsure whether he deserved it. His voice was hoarse. "I should have listened to you." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Regret sat loud enough between them. Chen stirred awake next, his eyes finding her immediately, then dropping quickly, not out of shame, but out of something rangers rarely felt toward anyone outside their own circle. Respect. Real, raw, unpolished respect. They broke camp slowly, quietly. Even Daya's, usually a constant stream of sarcasm and noise, was subdued. He shuffled beside Ali, whose injured leg was swollen and painfully wrapped. Every movement cost him, but he didn't complain. The desert had already humbled him. As the sun rose and spilled molten gold over the sand, Anna pointed to a shallow, twisting depression in the ground. "The wash flows that way," she said. "It's our safest route." Roar frowned. "High ground gives us comms, maybe a GPS lock." "High ground gives them a clear line of sight," she replied. "And now that the storm's over, the aggressor teams will be moving." He rubbed a hand across his jaw. His instinct said one thing. Experience, hers, said another. He exhaled. "We follow the wash." And that was the moment the dynamic shifted, not dramatically, not loudly, but unmistakably. It was the moment the squad stopped being 4 rangers dragging a Navy Master Chief behind them, and became 5 people trying to survive. They built a travois for Ali, simple poles, straps, and his pack frame, and Anna adjusted the ties so the weight distributed evenly. "Keep your hands under the straps," she told Diaz quietly. "Don't wrap them. If you fall, the rope will break your wrist." He blinked. "How the hell did you?" "Experience." After the first hour, the temperature began rising fast. Heat shimmered off the rocks like a living thing. Sweat evaporated before it reached skin. The desert punished every breath. Still, Anna moved with a strange, unsettling ease, as if she had long ago made peace with places that tried to kill her. She read the land while the others read their maps. She noticed details no one else saw: the angle of a sidewinder's track, the shade where it shouldn't be, the whisper of wind against a rock that meant something was hidden behind it. The deeper they traveled, the more the desert changed, narrow canyons twisting unpredictably, shadows hiding dangers that maps couldn't predict. And then she stopped. She didn't raise a hand, didn't shout. She simply inhaled sharply, eyes locking onto a point ahead. "What is it?" Roar whispered. She pointed at a cluster of rocks. "Someone's there." Diaz squinted through binoculars. "I don't see." "That's why they're good," she murmured. She pointed subtly. "The canvas edge on that stone, too dark, doesn't match the rock pattern." Another point. "That second stone, wrong shape, wrong placement. Boots knocked it loose." Roar felt something cold grip his spine. "An enemy observation post." "2 men," she added, "maybe more." "You think they saw us?" Diaz asked, voice thin. "They're waiting," she said, "which means they haven't yet." A tension settled over the squad, thick, suffocating, almost electric. Roar turned to her. "What's the move?" There was no hesitation. "We're not taking Ali into a crossfire," she said. "Diaz stays with him, keeps him hidden. Chen makes a diversion. You and I flank from high ground." Her tone was clear, decisive, and terrifyingly sure. They obeyed without question. For the first time since this mission began, Roar watched her not as a nuisance, or a rival, or a mystery, but as someone who belonged in places he wasn't sure he himself belonged. Chen hurled the diversion rock far down the wash. The clatter echoed like gunfire. The hidden men reacted instantly, their rifles aimed at the distraction. "Move," she whispered. Roar followed her up the ridge. The climb was steep and unstable, gravel sliding under their boots. His breath rasped in his chest. Sweat stung his eyes. Beside him, she moved like silence given form. When they reached the top, she motioned for him to freeze. Through a slit in the rock, the hidden soldiers were visible, 2 of them, weapons loose, attention locked on the diversion. Her voice was barely a breath. "On my signal." She held up 3 fingers. Roar's pulse pounded. 2 fingers. His grip tightened on his rifle. 1. The distraction came from below, a sharp crack of stone hitting stone. The camouflaged men turned. "Go," she whispered. Roar slid down the ridge, raising his weapon. But she didn't go down. She dropped. She flowed. She became a blur of control and precision, descending the slope like gravity itself obeyed her. The Opfer soldiers never had a chance. She hit the first one silently, a hand locking over his mouth, the edge of her palm striking a nerve at his neck. He dropped instantly. No sound, no struggle. The second man spun, eyes wide, and she was already shifting, dropping her weight low, striking his thigh at a pressure point that made his leg buckle. She put him down in a heartbeat. Roar reached the wash just in time to see her zip-tying their wrists, neutralizing weapons, clearing the area with professional detachment. He had seen trained soldiers before. He had never seen that. "Jesus," he whispered. "Don't use his name for this," she said calmly. This wasn't divine, it was predictable. She handed him the captured radio. "Find their frequency." He swallowed. "Master Chief, who are you?" Her eyes didn't flinch. "Someone you were told to ignore." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. Not yet. She turned back to the captured gear, sifting through intel, analyzing patterns, listening to the enemy chatter. Her face hardened as she deciphered the transmissions. "They're closing in," she said. "They think they know where we are." Roar asked quietly, "So what do we do?" Her answer was immediate. "We stop them. Not run. Not hide. Not evade. Stop them." Diaz stared at her from below, his voice trembling. "Stop them? With what? We're half dead and down a man." She met his eyes steady, unafraid. "With experience." Roar shook his head. "Experience doesn't take down a command node, Master Chief." She looked at him then. Really looked at him. And something in her expression shifted, a crack in the calm, a quiet reveal of a truth she'd held for years. "Sergeant," she said softly, "you've never seen what I do when I stop holding back." And for the first time, they all understood. The storm they had survived wasn't the worst thing waiting for them. The worst thing was her past, and the ghosts she carried. Ghosts about to wake. Why did she seem calmer now that danger was closer? And what kind of life teaches someone to breathe easier when everything starts to fall apart? The desert had stopped pretending to be empty. After the observation post-takedown, the silence wasn't peace, it was pressure. The kind that gathers before something breaks. Anna Sharma listened to the enemy frequencies through the captured radio, her eyes half-lidded, her breathing controlled. Roar, Diaz, Chen, and the injured Ali watched her with a mix of awe and wariness. She sat completely still, but something in her stillness had changed. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't shrinking herself to make others comfortable. She wasn't the overlooked outsider. She was operating. It was like watching a blade. Remember, it was a blade. Finally, she lowered the headset. "They're tightening the net," she said. "Half a dozen sweep teams, all closing from the perimeter inward. They believe we're still near the plateau, but they'll adjust quickly." Roar scanned the valley below. "Then we move fast. We need to escape the ring before they collapse around us." She shook her head. "We can't outrun them, not carrying Ali." Diaz bristled. "We're not leaving him." She didn't show the slightest irritation. "I never suggested that." "What then?" Roar asked. "Fight our way out?" "No," she said. "We end the exercise." He blinked. "We what?" She looked directly at him. "We take their command node." It was insane. No one assaulted the exercise control node, not trainees, not advisors, not even instructors. It wasn't done. But she said it with a certainty that left no cracks for doubt. Roar paced once, jaw tight. "We're low on water, exhausted. One man injured, and you want us to attack their headquarters. Yes. Diaz barked a humorless laugh. Chief, that's suicide. Her voice didn't rise, it didn't harden, it simply carried truth. It's the only way we all walk out. Roar froze. There it was again, that quiet authority that didn't ask permission. It just waited for reality to catch up. He rubbed a hand across his face, fatigue mixing with humiliation. You're asking us to trust you, blindly. She met his eyes. I trusted you in that storm, even when you didn't listen. He winced. Her words weren't an accusation. They were a mirror, gentle but unforgiving. After a long silence, he nodded once. What's the plan? She pointed to a narrow defile half a kilometer away. Diaz, Ali, you two hold there. High ground, good cover, limited approaches. If you hear prolonged gunfire, you retreat. Do not come after us. Diaz swallowed hard, and if you don't come back, then you retreat faster. She turned to Roar and Chen. Travel light, minimal gear, no unnecessary noise, stay on my heels, don't shoot unless I do. Her tone was not commanding. It was absolute. They moved like a ghost squad through the maze of canyons. Anna set a pace that should have been impossible after 36 hours in the desert, but she didn't show it. Fatigue clung to the others like a second skin, but she seemed carved from something that didn't burn out. Roar watched the way she moved, effortless, silent, eyes constantly scanning. Every few minutes she paused, tilting her head as if listening to something only she could hear. A memory. A warning. A ghost. He wanted to ask, he didn't. They reached the last stretch, a brutal climb up a steep, broken ridgeline toward Serpent's Tooth Peak. The wind whipped around them, carrying the smell of scorched earth and hot metal. Halfway up, Roar's foot slipped on a loose rock. He pitched backward. Her hand shot out, gripping his vest, pulling him in with a strength that didn't match her frame. You okay? She murmured. He nodded, breathless. Don't look down, she added. He hadn't planned to. They crested the hill and flattened themselves against the rocks. Below them, the command node came into view, a generator, antenna array, and large canvas tent with glow lights inside. 4 aggressor soldiers moved around the site. Sharma studied each one, how they held their rifles, who was distracted, who was alert. She watched their patterns, their posture, their breathing. She's not observing, Chen whispered. She's hunting. Roar swallowed hard. No. She wasn't hunting. She was calculating. She signaled them into position. Chen slid to the generator. Roar crawled beside her toward the tent. She moved so close to the ground that she looked like part of it. A sentry stood at the edge of the cliff, scanning the basin below. His posture was lazy, his grip sloppy. He was bored. A fatal condition. She ghosted behind him. One arm slipped around his throat, not a choke, but a precise blood cutoff. Her other hand caught his rifle before it could fall. His body sagged silently. She laid him down as if lowering a sleeping child. Roar's breath hitched. She didn't waste a second. Her hand flashed a signal. Chen smashed the generator with a controlled strike. The lights inside the tent died. Confusion erupted. What the? Power out. Check the relay. She whispered, go. They stormed the tent. Roar thought he'd be ready. He was. Sharma hit first, a blur in the dark. She slammed one man into a folding table, sending radios crashing. She swept the legs from another, disarming him in a single fluid motion. The third, the officer, reached for a pistol. Roar intercepted, driving him backward with his rifle. Within seconds, the tent belonged to them. Chen appeared in the doorway, breathless. Generators down, area secured. Sharma knelt by the command terminal, reactivating it on backup power. She slipped on the headset and spoke into the mic, her voice calm, clinical, devoid of emotion. Vanguard Actual, this is Trident. The exercise is terminated. C2 node secured. One friendly WIA stable. Request immediate evac. Silence. Then Colonel Madsen's voice crackled through, stunned, shaken, stripped of authority. Repeat your call sign. Her jaw tightened. Trident. Roar felt something click into place, a truth that had been circling them since this deployment began. Trident. A whispered legend, a classification, a role that existed only in the highest tiers of naval special warfare. Not a name, a designation. And she carried it. Madsen's voice returned, trembling with awe. Copy Trident, evac inbound, ETA 7 minutes. The line went dead. Roar stared at her, breath caught in his chest. Master Chief, why would someone like you be here? She didn't answer immediately. She finished securing the intel, closed the terminal, and finally met his eyes. You think experience comes from training, she said softly, but mine came from surviving things I wasn't supposed to survive. Her gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the storm had left deep scars across the desert. Some of us don't get to choose where we're sent, she continued. We only choose what we do when we arrive. It wasn't an answer, but it was the closest she'd come to admitting the weight she carried. In the distance, the Blackhawk's blades began to beat the air, the harsh, unmistakable sound of rescue and reckoning. Roar realized something then. They hadn't been saved by luck. They hadn't been saved by procedure. They had been saved by a woman who lived every day as if survival was a skill you never fully mastered, only practiced through pain. Sharma stood, slinging her rifle across her back. Her voice was steady, almost gentle. Time to go. But the truth lingered in the air, unspoken and undeniable. This exercise hadn't revealed her strength. It had revealed the restraint she'd been using to hide it. And the Rangers, humbled, shaken, forever changed, followed her out of the command tent, knowing they had only seen the edge of what she truly was. Why did victory feel heavier than defeat? And why was she the quietest person on the helicopter that came to save them? The rotor wash from the approaching Blackhawk whipped the dust into a vortex, choking the air with grit. The helicopter descended hard, blades rattling the stones across the cliff. It should have felt like rescue, salvation, even. But to the Rangers standing there, bruised and humbled, it felt like something else. A reckoning. Medics rushed toward Ali immediately, securing him onto a stretcher. Roar, Diaz, and Chen stepped back, suddenly unsure of their place in the world. They were Rangers, elite, confident, trained for hardship. And yet, over the last 48 hours, they had been forced to redefine strength by looking at a woman who carried it in silence. Anna Sharma. The quiet one. The outsider. The observer they hadn't wanted. Now the operator they couldn't look away from. She oversaw the medics work with precise, clinical detachment, outlining Ali's injuries, hydration status, pain response. The medics listened closely, nodding, trusting her as if she were their lead physician. To them, she wasn't an intruder. She was authority. When Ali was secured, the crew chief called out, "Load up." Roar and the others stepped aside. But then something happened that none of them expected. Roar approached her slowly, cautiously, as if stepping toward the truth itself. He blocked her path to the helicopter. She stopped. The wind whipped dust against their legs. The helicopter engine roared behind them, its urgency demanding movement. But for a brief moment, time stayed still. There was no resentment now. No pride. No ego left to protect. Just a soldier looking at someone who had dismantled every belief he had about skill, experience, and quietness. He straightened his back, brought his heels together, raised his right hand, and saluted her. Not out of rank, not out of obligation, but out of sheer, unfiltered respect. Respect for the way she had saved them. Respect for the way she had endured without complaint. Respect for the way she had held herself back until she couldn't anymore. Chen and Diaz followed him instantly, their salutes sharp, precise, flawless. They didn't look at each other. They didn't need to. Something collective had happened to them in that storm, something permanent. 3 Rangers saluting a Navy Master Chief in the dust and heat of the Mojave. Anna didn't move for a second. If she was surprised, it didn't show. Her expression stayed still, but something in her eyes softened. Only barely. The smallest shift, barely a flicker. Then she returned their salute. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't ceremonial. It was clean, minimal, and somehow powerful enough to close the chapter of everything that had happened between them. They boarded the helicopter. Inside, the noise drowned everything else, thoughts, regrets, even questions. The helicopter rattled, vibrated, groaned as it lifted off the peak. Wind lashed the open door. Roar sat strapped in, staring across at her. She sat with her back straight against the fuselage, hands resting on her rifle, eyes focused on the disappearing desert below. Her face was unreadable. He wanted to speak, ask something, anything. Who trained you? Where did you learn all of that? What happened to you? Why hide it? But every time he opened his mouth, something stopped him. There was a heaviness in her expression, not anger, not pride, not even exhaustion. It was something older, something like grief. He wondered then, as he watched her stare into the fading horizon, how many storms she had survived before this one. And how many storms had she survived alone? The helicopter touched down at the base with a hollow thud. The moment the ramp lowered, Colonel Madsen was there waiting. But not like before. He wasn't surrounded by aides. He wasn't flanked by officers. He didn't have the stiff arrogance of a man guarding tradition. He stood alone, as if he already knew everything had changed. She stepped off first. Madsen walked forward with stiff shoulders, stopping a few feet from her. He didn't speak, not at first. He studied her dust-caked uniform, bruised knuckles, the faint scar at her jawline, her impossibly steady eyes. When he finally spoke, the words were slow, heavy. Master Chief. Only 2 words. But they carried the weight of a man who rarely apologized, and almost never admitted he'd underestimated anyone. He reached down, unclipped the full canteen from his belt, and held it out to her. A gesture older than rank, older than doctrine, older than pride. Not a commendation, not a medal, just respect offered quietly, sincerely, without witnesses. You earned this, he said. She accepted it with a nod, lifted it, and drank. The water slid down her throat like something far more meaningful than hydration. Behind her, the Rangers watched this exchange with silent awe. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was a surrender. The colonel wasn't bowing to her rank, he was bowing to her truth. Night settled over the base like a heavy blanket. The story of the mission spread fast, not through official channels, but through whispers passed across bunks and tables and hallways. The storm, the rescue, the command node, the call sign, trident, a whisper, a myth, a living ghost. And the woman cleaning her weapon alone in the armory was the one wearing it. She didn't seek the attention. She didn't bask in the admiration. She didn't join any celebratory gathering. She went somewhere quieter, somewhere familiar. The armory was cold and still, lit by a single bulb that cast long shadows across the racks. She laid her disassembled rifle on a cloth, each piece arranged with a surgeon's precision. The rhythmic scrape of a brush through the barrel. The soft click of metal fitting into metal. The simple, repetitive motions of someone returning order to the world. It wasn't just maintenance. It was ritual. It was how she steadied herself after chaos, how she silenced memories, how she breathed again. A young private on guard drifted near the doorway, noticing the light. He paused, watching her. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't dare interrupt. He saw something he didn't understand, not fully. The fine web of scars on her hands, the intense focus in her eyes, the way she worked with familiarity that suggested she'd rebuilt that rifle more times than she could count. He didn't see a hero. He saw a survivor. He saw a woman who wasn't celebrating victory, because victory wasn't what she fought for. She fought to get her team home, even when the team wasn't hers. The private backed away silently, leaving her alone in her small circle of lamplight. She finished reassembling her rifle, checked the action, lubricated the slide of her sidearm, and holstered it with a soft click. Then she leaned her hands against the cool metal of the bench and looked out through the grimy window. Dawn was already creeping into the sky, hints of violet shading into gold. Another day beginning. Another watch to stand. And somewhere inside her, beneath the scars and discipline and silence, something unspoken stirred. Not pride. Not relief. Not even peace. Something simpler. A quiet acceptance that survival wasn't glory. It was work. Work she would keep doing, whether anyone saw her or not. Tomorrow would come, with new orders, new tensions, new people who underestimated her. But tonight, standing alone in the armory, she understood something clearly. Strength didn't need applause. Purpose didn't need permission. Dignity didn't need to speak. It simply acted. And she would act again. Because that was who she was. And who she had always been. Why did the quiet feel heavier tonight? And why did she sense that the mission wasn't truly over, even after the desert had returned her home? Morning rose over Fort Irwin with a pale, washed-out glow, the kind of dawn that made everything look softer than it really was. Trucks moved lazily across the motor pool. Soldiers trudged toward the mess hall with tired eyes and stiff backs. Life resumed its routine. But something under the surface had shifted. The Rangers could feel it in the stares that followed them, in the questions whispered behind cups of coffee, in the stories muttered by soldiers who hadn't even been there. A legend had woken in the desert, and its name was Anna Sharma. She walked toward the debriefing room with the same steady stride she had carried since the storm, quiet, efficient, almost serene. Chen, Diaz, and Roar followed behind her, each wearing the weight of the last 48 hours like an invisible ruck. None of them said anything. There were no jokes now. No challenges. No prideful glances. Just a silent, shared understanding that something inside each of them had been reshaped. The debriefing room buzzed with officers, analysts, instructors, too many faces, too much noise. Screens glowed with maps and timelines. Charts were taped to the walls. Someone had even set up a projector, as if this were a briefing for a real mission and not an exercise gone sideways. Madsen stood at the front, arms folded, jaw clenched, but his hardness wasn't the same as before. It had cracks now. Real ones. "Master Chief," he said as she entered. Her expression didn't change. "Colonel." He looked at her longer than necessary, not with suspicion anymore, but with the reluctant recognition of a man seeing a truth he had tried to ignore. "Take a seat," he said. She remained standing. "Respectfully, sir, I prefer to stand." A few officers exchanged glances. Madsen gave a short nod, maybe irritation, maybe acceptance. Roar, Diaz, and Chen stood beside her, forming a quiet line at her back like they had done so many times in the storm without realizing it. Madsen cleared his throat. "This after-action review won't go on record." A ripple of murmurs, officers frowned. One major looked confused. "No record?" someone asked. Madsen didn't look away from Sharma. "Correct. Some things don't go into files. Some things won't be understood by the people who read them." That silence, the heavy one, filled the room. He gestured to a screen. "What happened out there has already rewritten protocol." Dais shifted. Chen stared at the floor. Roar held his breath. Madsen's voice softened. "Not by much, but enough to matter. You saved 4 lives, Master Chief. You terminated an exercise that you had every right to terminate. Your judgment was sound. Your actions were precise. And your restraint," he paused, "your restraint is what I cannot understand." Sharma's eyes lowered for the first time. Not out of shame, out of memory. Somewhere deep, a door she kept locked shifted on its hinges. Roar stepped forward. "Sir." Madsen lifted a hand. "Sergeant, let her speak." But she didn't. She didn't need explanations. She didn't want validation. She didn't seek praise. Instead, she finally said, "Threats don't need to be crushed to be neutralized. Sometimes they only need to be redirected." The room went still. It was such a simple sentence, but the weight behind it was undeniable. The philosophy of someone who had lived through carnage and somehow refused to become it. Madsen nodded once. "The Rangers owe you their lives, so does this command." The Rangers stiffened. Sharma only blinked. Madsen cleared his throat. "This concludes the AAR, dismissed." An awkward shuffle, footsteps, chairs moving. But she didn't leave, not yet. She looked at the colonel, studying him. He sensed it, meeting her gaze fully for the first time. "I misjudged you," he said quietly. "Not because of your uniform, because I didn't understand what silence can mean." She dipped her head. "Most people don't." Roar lingered behind her. He had been quiet through the entire review, but now something restless pushed through him. "Master Chief." She turned. He swallowed. If you ever needed anything, advice, backup, a team, we'd show up." Chen nodded immediately, earnest. Diaz mumbled something that might have been agreement but sounded like emotional surrender. For the first time, faint humor touched her eyes. "You don't even like me, Diaz." He cleared his throat. "Yeah, well, liking is overrated." Roar stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You didn't just save our lives, you changed them." She held his gaze, reading something deeper: fear, respect, confusion, admiration, all tangled into one ache. "You changed yourselves," she said. "I only gave you a storm." He exhaled, a quiet, humbled breath. "Still," he said, "if you ever needed people." She didn't smile, but something inside her shifted, a softening, a thaw. "Thank you," she said. And that was enough. Night returned, cool and star-washed over the base. Most soldiers settled into their bunks or wandered into the common hall to trade exaggerated versions of the story, some accurate, some embellished beyond recognition. But Anna didn't go to her quarters. She walked alone toward the firing range, boots crunching softly over gravel. A cold wind brushed against her face. The desert, so violent only a day earlier, now whispered gently across the sands. She sat on the empty bleachers, hands resting on her knees, chin tilted toward the moon. The quiet pressed around her, the heavy kind that carried ghosts. She closed her eyes. Faces flickered in the darkness behind her eyelids. People she had saved. People she had failed. People who had once stood beside her. People who never made it home. Storms of a different kind. And she inhaled slowly, letting the memories come, letting them hurt. Because hurt was proof of what she had carried and why she carried it so quietly. She didn't cry, but she did something rarer. She allowed herself to feel. Not guilt, not pride, not sorrow, just humanity. Footsteps approached from behind. Soft, hesitant, familiar. "Roar," He stopped a respectful distance away. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't open her eyes. "Are you?" He gave a quiet, awkward laugh. "Honestly, I don't know yet." "That's honest," she murmured. He lowered himself beside her. Two silhouettes under desert moonlight, shaped by separate storms, now sharing the quiet in a way words couldn't. After a long pause, he said softly, "When we were crawling through that storm, the way you moved, the certainty you had, I kept wondering if you were afraid." "I was," she said immediately. He blinked. She continued, "Fear doesn't prevent clarity, it sharpens it. It reminds you what you're willing to lose and what you can't." Roar absorbed that. The desert hushed around them. Finally, he whispered, "What about now? Are you afraid now?" For a moment, she didn't answer. She opened her eyes slowly, looking at the vast, indifferent horizon. "Yes," she said quietly, "of what comes next, of what I might have to be again, of who I might lose next time." He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Silence, the kind she trusted, settled between them. She stood after a moment, dusting off her uniform. "It's late," she said. "You should rest." He nodded. "What about you?" "I'll sleep when I need to." And he understood. She wasn't avoiding sleep. She was standing a watch only she could stand. He watched her walk back toward the base, small, quiet, solitary, but transformed in his eyes into something enormous. Not a myth, not a legend, not a ghost, a guardian. Someone who carried her own storms, so others didn't have to. Someone who believed dignity didn't need noise. Someone who had learned long ago that survival wasn't glory, it was duty. And sometimes the strongest warriors were the ones who fought with silence. The desert was still when she reached her quarters. She stepped inside, closed the door, and finally let her shoulders drop, the smallest, most fragile unraveling. Her gear settled on the floor. Her rifle leaned against the wall. She sat on the edge of the bed and let out a long, steady breath, the kind she hadn't allowed herself in days. Outside, the world spun on. Inside, she simply existed, not a myth, not a rank, not a ghost. Just a woman who had done the work. And would do it again. Because that was what strength meant. Not loudness. Not dominance. Not fame. Strength was the quiet that held a world together. Strength was the calm that steadied others. Strength was the storm she survived, so someone else didn't have to. And in the soft dimness of her small room, she whispered a truth she rarely allowed herself to speak out loud. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. She closed her eyes, exhaustion finally claiming her. It simply acts. And somewhere in the desert, the wind carried those words into the night, as if returning them to a world that badly needed to hear them.